What unfolds in this exchange is not just a disagreement over a visa. It is a confrontation over the soul of American democracy, what we allow the government to do in our name, and whether we still believe in the principles we claim to stand for. Representative Pramila Jayapal isn't merely questioning Marco Rubio. She's calling the country's attention to the quiet, dangerous ways that democratic norms erode long before anyone officially announces they're under attack. Jayapal begins by grounding the conversation in the human reality that so often gets lost in political arguments. A student, alone in a foreign country, doing what American universities encourage their students to do: think, question, write, participate. She wrote an op-ed. Not a bomb threat, not a manifesto of violence, not a classified leak. A piece of writing in a student newspaper. And for that, her visa was revoked. Her freedom was taken. Armed men, masked and anonymous, whisked her off the street as if she were a national security threat. Jayapal knows exactly why this matters. When the state begins using its power to punish people for expressing ideas, that is not about visa technicalities. That is about freedom. It's about whether the First Amendment is still meaningful or whether it becomes a shield only for the speech the government approves of. She forces viewers to ask, if the government can deport a student for an op-ed today, who can it punish tomorrow? Rubio tries to retreat to legal technicalities. No constitutional right to a student visa. But Jayapal sees through the maneuver instantly. The issue is not the visa. The issue is the government's motive. If power is used to retaliate against speech, even if that speech comes from a foreign student, the United States stops being a country that protects ideas and becomes a country that polices them. And Democrats have consistently warned that this is exactly how democracies fail, not through sudden coups, but through the normalization of government intimidation disguised as procedural authority. Jayapal refuses to let Rubio hide behind statutory language. She strips the argument down to its core. Who gets to decide what speech is acceptable? Who gets to decide what ideas justify punishment? Because if the Secretary of State can revoke a visa for writing an op-ed, then the government has effectively granted itself the power to silence dissent. And in that moment, what we're discussing isn't immigration law, it's authoritarianism. The exchange becomes even more unsettling when Jayapal brings up the masked, armed officers who seized the student. Rubio tries to distance himself, claims he is not responsible, but Jayapal refuses to let him escape accountability. She sees the pattern clearly. A government that wants to expand its power often uses secrecy as a first step. Masks. No identification. No transparency. No immediate access to counsel. These are the tactics of a state that wants to operate without scrutiny. She presses the fundamental question. Why were they masked? These are not the conditions under which federal agents normally operate. Throughout history, law enforcement in the United States has performed high-risk, high-stakes arrests without facial coverings, without hiding their identities. Jayapal exposes the hollowness of Rubio's explanation that agents needed masks because of radical crazies. The claim collapses under the weight of common sense. If unmasked officers can arrest cartel leaders, violent fugitives, and dangerous extremists, why suddenly mask up for a graduate student who wrote a critical op-ed? Because the goal here wasn't safety. It was intimidation. The goal was to send a message that the government can operate in shadows when it wants to, and that people who speak out can face consequences without accountability or transparency. Jayapal understands that when the government hides its face, it is telling the public that it no longer feels bound to explain itself. The moment she asks whether Rubio would revoke the visa of someone who published anti-Semitic statements, she exposes the selective nature of his outrage. Because freedom of speech is not something you defend only when it is easy or politically convenient. If the standard shifts depending on who is speaking and what they're saying, then it is not a standard at all. It is an ideology disguised as policy. And Jayapal highlights how the previous administration granted refuge to a white supremacist who made the exact hateful claims she quoted. That contradiction matters because it reveals the political project at play: silence certain speech, amplify other speech, and call it national security. Jayapal's approach in this exchange teaches a powerful lesson. Democracy requires consistency. It requires the government to apply principles equally, even when the speech is uncomfortable or foreign or critical of the United States. When Jayapal demands to know why the student was taken, why she was denied a lawyer, why masked agents were involved, she isn't just advocating for one person. She's defending the broader idea that government power must be checked, questioned, and held to constitutional standards. What she is really saying is that the Constitution does not wear a passport. Free speech does not belong only to citizens. The right to dissent is not an exclusive membership. And the government does not get to decide whose voice deserves protection. If America is truly a democracy, then even those who challenge American policy have the right to do so without fear of retaliation. That is what makes Jayapal's argument so deeply democratic. It is rooted in the belief that freedom must apply to everyone, or it ceases to be freedom at all. In this exchange, she's doing what oversight is supposed to do, forcing the executive branch to answer for its actions. And that matters because democracies don't fall overnight. They fall when people stop asking questions. They fall when intimidating tactics become normalized. They fall when power goes unchecked. Jayapal's confrontation is a reminder that democracy is not a self-sustaining machine. It needs defenders. It needs people who will say no when the government overreaches. It needs leaders who will speak up for the voiceless, even when that voice belongs to a graduate student thousands of miles from home. If you believe in freedom, if you believe in fairness, if you believe in a country where the government is accountable to the people, then this moment matters. And if you want deeper conversations that help you understand not just what is happening in American politics, but why it matters and what we can learn from it, stay engaged, stay informed, and stay with us. Because the health of democracy depends on people who pay attention.